Lee Strobel grew up Lutheran, and let me say right off the bat, I'm not picking on us Lutherans. I don't know of a denomination or a church or a pastor that you could talk to out there in the world who wouldn't say that forming communities of faith and followers of Jesus is not a significant challenge in this day and age. We're not particularly inept as Lutherans. In fact, as you know, that's the theme of this worship series that we're concluding today, the pathway to an awakening faith. How does that happen? How do we find an awakening faith? By the time Lee Strobel was in middle school, he had lots of questions. He'd ask, why does God allow suffering? And how can God send people to hell just for not believing in Jesus? If you're like me, you've asked those same questions. Usually people would ignore this rebellious kid with all of his questions. And if anyone did engage him, the answer he heard most often was, because the Bible says so. Consequently, he said that as a kid, he missed it. He missed it. His church was certainly well intended, but he missed it. And what did he miss? Well, he missed what we're asking God for in this series, a faith that is awakened, a faith that guides our feet, our steps, our life, that instills us for life now and forever. He missed it. He became, he said, an atheist, which means someone that didn't believe in God at best, or even at worst, became antagonistic of the church. Keep our reference point in mind in this series. The rapidly growing number of people we see in this chart, those who are finding the faith, our faith, to be less relevant, those who are growing as a number of people who have no identity with any faith community. Stop for a moment and think about it. Picture your circle of relationships, the people in your life, your family, your friends, your colleagues, especially those who are younger. How many are becoming a stranger to the Christian faith? How many people do you know who are described by these trends? Lee Strobel grew up and earned a degree in journalism, undergraduate degree in journalism from the University of Missouri, and then he went on to law school at Yale, got a master's in law, and he combined these disciplines and became an investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune. He was an award-winning reporter for a number of years. He was, by every means, looking like a great success. The life that he was living, he was married, had 2 kids, a successful career, but underneath the veneer of success, trouble was brewing. To me, and not all atheists think this way, he said, but I did, that if there really is no God, and no heaven, and no hell, well, then the most logical thing to do with your life, with the one shot that you get to live on this planet, is to go after every pleasure you can find. And that's how I lived. But ultimately, my lifestyle became a dead end. Strobel drank a lot of alcohol. Work was stressful. He'd often come home drunk and angry, and to this day, he's most ashamed of his anger. Got to the point where when his young daughter would be playing in the living room and would hear Daddy coming in the front door from work, she would instantly pick up her toys and go lock herself in a room, a place where she knew she could be safe from her dad's rage. After work one day, Strobel came home to see his wife, Leslie, sitting at the kitchen table. She had an anxious look on her face, which was not abnormal given how he would often come home and erupt about something from work. But before he had a chance to say a word, she looked up at him and she said, "I've given my life to Christ. I've become a Christian." Strobel was shocked. He knew his wife had been going to church, but that became the impetus for him to start an investigation, he said. When she came to faith, a couple of things happened. There were a lot of positives, winsome changes in her that drew me towards the faith. But on the other hand, I wanted to get her out of this cult. So I thought I would use my journalism and my legal training to rescue her, to convince her. And my hopeful conclusion was that I could prove to her that this was all false and I could save her from this nonsense. Ironically, Strobel's background in journalism and law prepped him in kind of a unique way to do that investigation. Just as you might investigate a major story for the Chicago Tribune, he investigated the biggest faith question he could think of. Who is Jesus? He was overwhelmed by what happened. God took his checkered background and used it for good. His life has become this great adventure that decades later he's not stopped sharing with others. Lee Strobel has written many, many books, but the first one I urge you to read is called The Case for Christ. Remember our pathway to an awakening faith? Like Lee Strobel, kids get to middle school age and can have a lot of questions. Not all kids, but many of us. And we've been led to believe that faith is all about believing the right things. We think that faith is something that we need to learn intellectually. But think about it. Jesus did not come preaching doctrine. He met people where they lived. He took interest in their lives, whoever they were. He engaged with them. He shared with them. He walked with them. He loved them. He accepted them. He spent years with them. Think of it. Peter, Levi, Mary Magdalene, the Apostle Paul. The Bible's filled with story after story of people who were shocked by how Jesus changed their lives. Jesus showed them what joy and peace and purpose looked like and felt like and acted like, and he invited them to follow. He recruited them to be part of his mission to save lives. How about you and me? Who do we say that Jesus is? You know, it's still true today if we ask the person on the street, kind of like Jesus asked the disciples that day, who do the people say that I am? If we went out and interviewed random people to the degree that they would answer at all and not think we were just some of those weirdos getting weird on them, they would probably say something like, well, he was a good person. Some might say he was a religious person, maybe kind of a prophetic sort of person, but God came into this world in Jesus to be more. He came to rescue. He came to heal. He came to teach. He came to love people that didn't feel lovable. He came to give people a second chance who had gone the wrong way in life. He came so that people who are lonely would find life-giving community. He came so that people who think that their life doesn't matter would discover that they matter very much. He came to change you and me. He came to change this world, and ultimately he came to personally recruit you and me, because what he was about was not just reaching you and me. It was about reaching the people that you and I live with, who have to put up with us. And through us, the people that we work with, the people that we share this planet with. Lee Strobel found out that his wife had been praying for quite a while that he would give God a chance and come to church. He ended up going to church in order to try to get her out of that cult. Instead, he found a people and relationships that made him want to be a better person. He found that his angry, disbelieving, verbally abusive self could go a whole nother direction with his life. He found an open door. Be that open door. He found a people that were genuine and open and down to earth, just like God coming down to earth, with whom he could find genuine friendships, acceptance, and belonging. Let's be that kind of community. He found a group of people where he could look over at his life and say, these behaviors that are going on, I don't want this. This isn't who I am. And through study and worship and prayer, those behaviors were replaced by a new way of life. He found that he could investigate and didn't have to be afraid of asking these questions that are inevitably part of life, and discovering that questions are part of a real faith and that God will meet us in our questions and conversation. He found a life that he'd always longed for, the life that you and I long for, the purposes that Jesus is recruiting us for. God, awaken our faith.